We're talking still about choosing a topic. And choosing a topic for the interdisciplinary project on the Gilded Age. And remember that we can't know everything. So, using the built in devices and interfaces that a lot of great databases have can be super useful in going ahead and determining something that not only are you interested in, but also that you can be reassured there's plenty of resources about it. I want to take a look at the historical newspapers, which is just, I swear, my favorite database ever. I absolutely love it. I play with it in my spare time. I think it's so fascinating to go ahead and take a look at. This is also a ProQuest database. It's the company who makes them. You can see that you can search by decade or specific dates. You can do between certain dates or before or after. Note what it is that you're searching. These are the newspapers that it includes. It's the full run of the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, the Los Angeles Times, the Atlanta Constitution. Those are all newspapers that I want to say the earliest one, the Hartford Courant is the earliest one in 1765, but those first few are probably like the 1840s forward, and obviously encompass several different areas of the United States. With back when it was more regional, that actually is pretty significant. Notice though that it also has the Chicago Defender and the Pittsburgh Courier, as well as the Baltimore Afro-American. These are historically Black newspapers that came into being usually in the late 19th century and often went through to the 1920s, 1930s for the most part. So, in terms of our time period, they also can give an incredibly valuable and very different perspective from traditionally white newspaper coverage on various incidences. Obviously, those relating to issues of race, but just in general, that can be a really interesting thing to go ahead and take a look at. And then when you search, you're also searching by default the general articles, the front page, and editorials, but there are other options as well that you can go ahead and do. Now, clearly, if you know what it is that you're looking for, you can certainly go ahead and search on it. And that's terrific. But we're talking about browsing, right? We're talking about choosing a topic. And I actually find that so many of us are really visual. So having something like a timeline is incredibly useful to go ahead and take a look at. So clearly you have to make sure that your Adobe Flash Player is enabled to go ahead and take a closer look at the timeline. But this is what it looks like. You have got a timeline, and notice up here it starts in 1850. Like I said, the New York Times is probably where it's starting from, and that's about the 1840s. And it's going and giving you this idea of, well, here are the various topics that fall into these time periods, and here are their lengths. And notice that it sort of scrolls down. You can see that there are some that are really detailed down here, specific instances or events that are available. And obviously there's a lot more in the 20th century because there's a lot more newspaper coverage. But if we even take over here this idea of, okay, so let's say 1870 to about 1910 is our time period, we've got a ton of progressive era stuff, westward expansion and imperialism, as well as the industrial age. Okay, so let me go ahead and think about the industrial age because I want to know more about what that encompasses. Just by clicking on this, now the Historical Newspapers database has gone ahead and said, here are the key subtopics that are happening under this broader umbrella of the industrial age. So you can see we have breakthroughs in technology, Alexander Graham Bell inventing the telephone, Thomas Edison, energy, transportation, the automobile, the workplace and labor, because obviously we have that. Here we're getting into robber baron stuff. Here's John D. Rockefeller and Standard Oil, Carnegie, the Morgan and U.S. Steel, the antitrust movement, the rise of leisure time. Okay, I'm a social history person, so I have to figure out what that means. And then, of course, populism, which is such an interesting topic as well. Now, let's take a look at leisure time. First, it's giving us a paragraph about, like, okay, when we say the industrial age in this time period, this is what we're talking about. But now I want to know more about this particular thing. So I'm going to click on Rise of Leisure Time, and notice what it does. It gives me a more specific paragraph about what it's talking about when it says the rise of leisure time. It's basically this idea that changes in the workplace, in the increase of economic beneficiaries for people, that means that more people have more time on their hands and they're not working 7 days a week. So all of a sudden there are leisure activities that crop up. So note what it goes ahead and does. They have gone ahead, the historians and librarians associated with this database have put together all of the articles for me that I need in order to understand this better. And they've done it in chronological order. So starting in 1870, they're talking about private skating rinks, which didn't exist prior to then, and how it's this new thing. Here's baseball, which actually has a hyphen because that's how new it is. And you have this professionalization. We have the circus. We have this idea of a summer vacation. There's no such thing as a vacation or a weekend unless you're incredibly wealthy. So this is kind of cool. The bicycle is a huge thing. Public music, shopping. You have the rise of the department store in this time period. It didn't exist, prior to the late 19th century. So that's a huge thing. Shopping by mail. The Sears Roebuck catalog changed the way that people lived and allowed people in very rural areas to have access to materials that they wouldn't have either. The horses v bicycle thing, that could be really interesting. So you have this idea of boxing, and so it's probably, let's see, it's 25 per page. So do they have a full, so it's 42 articles. That first one was in 1870 about the skating rink. This one is up to 1916 to give you this sense of all these various types of leisure activities. And depending what you're doing, like obviously I can see several sports have a ton of stuff here. Here's the lady bicyclist in pants. Okay, we have to look at that. 1893. So here's the actual PDF of this. This is from the Washington Post in 1893. Lady bicyclist in pants. A woman riding a bicycle in knickerbockers and a long stockings with a sack coat and peak capped created more surprise on Park Road this afternoon among the thousands who watched a bulletins about the yacht race than an earthquake. So clearly you can see that there are some issues here. This is a primary article showing women in a leisure activity, the reaction of people to said leisure activity. It's changing the idea of dress. So there are a lot of things that you can go ahead and take a look at. Notice a couple of things up top. Do you see this add to my list with the plus button? If you go back to the search list, you can actually see it's beside each one of these. This is essentially like adding it to your shopping cart. Once you put something in there, you know it's there because of this. And I could just go ahead and put in whichever articles I thought was key to what I wanted to read more about. And then once they're there, you can go up to my list, and this is essentially the cart where everything is being held for you. And it will do a good amount. I want to say that you can get up to 25 articles at a time. And when you're ready, you can simply click on email the current page and just type in your email address, your name, the subject, and click attach PDF images and hit submit. And it just sends you all the articles as PDFs, which you can then easily save into your Google Drive, because I'm guessing you're probably going to have a folder for your paper anyway. So this is a great way to go ahead and browse, to go ahead and take a look kind of graphically about what it is that you're looking at, and have just a sense of the various topics that are out there. You can do it through a couple of different interfaces, but when it comes time to actually browsing and knowing that there's plenty of primary sources out there to help support whatever it is that you're interested in, this is a great thing to go ahead and really delve in and be reading what people of the time period were reading about the topic that you think might be a good topic for you to have for your paper.